Hey, what's going on, everybody? In today's video, I'm going to be giving you guys an update of my 2024 NFL draft board. I put my face cam, in the lower left-hand side so they don't cut off any of the top players, and so you guys basically see everything in the top, which is the most important. But once again, obviously I do this, I've been doing this the last 2 years. I made my draft board last year, and my prospect grades, which obviously I haven't given anybody grades yet because I haven't watched any of the film on these prospects yet, as we're not in the draft season. We're still in bowl season. It's starting, I think it's starting really tomorrow, or today, actually. It's Saturday. Or no, it's Friday today. I'm wrong. But prospect grading system on my left, right above me, actually, is based on the NFL.com rankings for prospects. And obviously it's color coded as well, such as green's first round grade, brown and yellow is second round, light blue fourth, fifth round, sixth round, seventh round. You get the deal. Let's get right into talking about these prospects. So obviously I'll begin with quarterback because that's where everybody is going to begin. I'm debating on moving Caleb Williams down to an early first grade. Blue chip prospect. I don't know. I think Caleb Williams probably is a Pro Bowl level player at one point in his career, but I don't know if he has all pro potential. I think he is right around that mark where I believe he's going to be a plus NFL starter. I believe he'll come into the NFL and do well, but I think that there are going to be some moments in his NFL career that aren't the best, obviously. I think that he'll probably have some of the low lights in the season, like bad sacks or some costly interceptions. I think that with Caleb Williams I like him a lot as a prospect, but I don't love him enough to make him my number one prospect in the draft. I think he is the number one overall pick, but I don't think he's the best prospect. I think he's around 2 or 3. I think Marvin Harrison is a better prospect, and I think Brock Bowers, relative to his position, is also better. And for Caleb Williams, some of those interceptions against really good teams like Utah, like Notre Dame, like Washington, he struggled against a lot other than Washington. He struggled against Notre Dame heavily. 3 interceptions in the first half, and 2 of them were bad. One of them was, I think, a tipped ball. But overall, like the way he creates outside of the pocket and the way he can, he's got really good accuracy. He's not the biggest quarterback, which is going to be a knock on him, but he's super elusive. He's fast. He has, where he's great work on the ground. He's great work through the air. He has the college production with the Heisman. I still think I don't think it's worth overreacting to him as a prospect because this year didn't go his way much. USC defense was absolutely god awful. I don't think we should react harshly to the team's negative success. I think we should look at him as a prospect relative to how the offense played, and that's kind of how you're supposed to evaluate prospects. Moving on to Drake May, I also still have him as my number 2. I actually have his name wrong here. Drake May. I think about Drake May is the similar thing happens with Caleb Williams is, team success is not there. Top-rated prospects, not great teams, other than like Jaden Daniels, or same thing can be said about Jaden Daniels. But like, the thing about Drake May is I love his accuracy. He also has a great arm. He led the NCAA in big time throws, according to PFF. I think he has a 70% accuracy, which is really good, and he did it with pretty lackluster receiver group for UNC outside of Tez Walker, who I did not ask Tez Walker. By the way, Tez Walker, wide receiver, UNC. Weird thing with his... I'll have to give him a projection in a second. Weird thing with his eligibility. We'll get back to that. But Drake May, like his accuracy a lot, like his mobility as well. I think he's got a great arm. He's like a mini Herbert to me. Similar thing coming out of a middling school like Oregon, and then UNC with Drake May. Similar stories as well, but have him as my second graded quarterback, and I think I have him within my top 5. I think I have him at 4 in my top 50. Jay Daniels, quarterback out of LSU. 50 touchdowns, almost 5,000 yards in total. He is 6'4", like 210, 220, and he runs like a 4.4. When he goes downhill, it's pretty scary. His elusiveness is crazy on the ground. He's, for that big of a size, he can really get away from defenders, and he's got that acceleration and burst on the ground that let him get 1,200 yards on the ground. But also, he's got a phenomenal arm. He was the best passer down the field in the NCAA. He had like 20 touchdowns of 20 plus yards. I mean, that's why Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas Jr. had such good years, because Jaden Daniels was just throwing absolute dimes. And I mean, 70% completion percentage as well, with an 11.6 yards per attempt. So, and he won the Heisman. That's what people are going to really take away from the season, was he won the Heisman. But looking a little deeper, he was really deserving of it. And as a prospect, you can look at it two ways. You could say, yeah, he's 23 years old. He has only really 2 years of major college production in the SEC, which is last year at LSU and this year. And how do we feel about a quarterback that, really only threw to 2 receivers the majority of the year, and who ejects the pocket pretty early on when he doesn't like his first read? Or you can look at it as a guy that has, the Lamar Jackson build of things, where he's crazy on the ground and he's got a good arm. And Lamar Jackson, stigma out of Louisville was he doesn't have a really good arm. There's no denying that Jaden Daniels has a phenomenal arm. So I like him as a prospect a lot. I think I have him as a late first round. I think I'm going to move him up, though. I might move him up to a mid first round grade. I really like Jaden Daniels. But Bo Nix, quarterback out of Oregon. Thing about Bo Nix is, again, you can look at the age. You can look at, Oregon's success this year, and you can really attribute it to Bo Nix because, 2 interceptions. He led the NCAA in least amount of interceptions, led the NCAA in completion percentage. I don't know why I was forgetting that there. But, again, he's going to be 24. He's 6 years in the NCAA is a lot of years. But hey, I think he's going to be a late first round because, he's going to be 29 by the end of his rookie contract. And moving on to age, the same thing about Michael Penix Jr. is the injury history: 2 ACL tears, shoulder injury, 5 years in the NCAA, as well as, Washington is in the college football playoffs. They're the number 2 ranked team. And he also has been tearing up ranked opponents. They beat every ranked opponent they faced. They beat Oregon twice. Michael Penix Jr., smaller lefty, around like 6'2", 6'1", but he does have a great arm. He's got good accuracy. But the one nick that I have about Michael Penix Jr. is the checkdowns. He will forego the easy throw, the easy check down, especially when it's to his right side, so he has to turn his hips. He'll just gun a deep ball, whether it's in double coverage or not. But I for some quarterbacks that can work. Like, look at Derek Carr's success in 2018, which is, his style of play is pretty similar to Michael Penix Jr. Moving on to J.J. McCarthy. I think J.J. McCarthy is a solid prospect, but I don't love him as a prospect. Meanwhile, I have him as the quarterback 6. J.J. McCarthy is, I think, a victim of the small quarterback archetype where, Zach Wilson received some of the criticism, and that was obviously warranted in the NFL, which is, he's a try to make a big play guy. He'll evade out of the pocket and throw on the run, which, by the way, he does better than pretty much anybody, or he does better than anybody else in the NCAA, which is throwing on the run. But, J.J. McCarthy, very also like solid in the pocket. He's not afraid to throw the deep ball, even if he doesn't have the greatest arm talent. He's got good accuracy. But the thing about Michigan is obviously their running game was phenomenal. They had like 20, I don't know how many exact touchdowns, maybe like 28, almost 30 touchdowns on the ground, with J.J. McCarthy only having 20 through the air, with also probably the best defense in the NCAA. So obviously his job at Michigan isn't too much. It's pretty much to not lose games. But J.J. McCarthy, really good thrower on the run, solid arm talent, not the greatest arm strength, not the greatest size either, but I think there's a possibility he could go back to Michigan. I mean, if they don't win the national championship, I think that's a good reason why. I don't see another contender next year outside of Michigan if he comes back. But yeah, I mean, I just think the other prospects are just much better in the quarterback class. But obviously, as that's the last big name in the quarterbacks, we'll go on to Shedeur Sanders and Quinn Ewers, who are both definitely going back to school. Shedeur Sanders, I think, is already confirmed going back to Colorado. And Quinn Ewers, I think, is pretty much going back to Texas, as the reports will make me to believe, especially essentially that he's just not coming out of school. And I don't see why. Texas just lost Malik Murphy, which is the backup, and Arch Manning is not ready to go for Texas, as he'll be a redshirt freshman. No, he'll be a redshirt sophomore next year. No, he'll be a redshirt freshman. I don't even know. But I guess I'll. Well, oh yeah, another thing, like a lot of these prospects have already declared or have not declared or have elected to transfer. So obviously some of these players will just not be here in the next update. I'll have to move them to my 2025 board because they will likely go in next year's. So moving on to Jordan Travis, obviously FSU was not selected to go in the college football playoffs, even though they were undefeated. And it was pretty much all due to Jordan Travis breaking his leg. Gruesome break, though. It's a full break of his tibia or shin bone. But Jordan Travis is very similar to JJ McCarthy. I think they've got similar size. They've got similar arm talent. But the thing about Jordan Travis is I think he's a slight bit more accurate, and his jump balls are what really made him, or really made receivers excel. Example, Keon Coleman. Example, Johnny Wilson. Those are two jump ball receivers, and he made them, very productive in the end zone. But Jordan Travis does a lot more with, I think, his legs. Very much an athletic quarterback. A bit up there in age. He's a fifth year senior. But obviously that injury is going to impact his draft stock as well. He's not going to be ready. I don't think he'll be ready for OTAs, but he'll probably be ready for the regular season next year. But that's an Alex, not necessarily an Alex Smith type of break in his leg, but it's relatively similar. Michael Pratt at Tulane, solid. He's had 2 very solid years at Tulane, with them being both ranked. We'll have to see him in the bowl game. I'll have to see him more in the bowl game. But another very athletic quarterback. I think he's got a bit more size than guys like Jordan Travis and Jim McCarthy, but also he's not better at throwing the ball than those two. But athletic quarterback, dual threat type of quarterback as well. Joe Milton out of Tennessee, I think he has to declare because he's a senior, but I don't think Joe Milton is going to garner a lot of draft hype just because, big arm guy, not very accurate, mobile, but not very mobile. He's that boom or bust type of prospect. He was that boom or bust type of prospect coming into the draft, and Tennessee was the least productive they've been on offense in the last couple of years. And, quarterback play was a little bit why losing Hendon Hooker last year kind of showed that. Riley Leonard, Kentucky, I think he already jumped to the transfer portal. He's probably going to go to Notre Dame or some other school in that region. So he's not going in this draft. Same thing with Tyler Van Dyke. But Sam Hartman, I think I'm going to probably move him down to like a 6th round grade. I mean, I'm not the biggest fan of Sam Hartman. I don't necessarily think he's more of an NFL prospect. I think he could be drafted, but he'll probably be cut within the first couple of years. Why do I say that? Well, not a lot of NFL production at a high level. Played at Notre Dame 1 year. He was all right. Last year. Notre Dame probably lost a lot more games, or probably should have won more games if they had a better quarterback. Under center, obviously they had Audric Estimine. Sorry, Audric. I always forget his name, but he's right here. KJ Jefferson as well. Same thing with Arkansas. KJ Jefferson's all right. He's really good on the ground, but that's kind of it. Cameron Ward out of Washington State is going to go to another school, so he's not going to be in this draft. And Spencer Rattler declared, but I also don't think Spencer Rattler is an NFL quarterback. So this year's quarterback class is super top heavy. It's super top heavy with these 6 guys. Love these 6 guys. The rest of them are not very good, even relative to where I think they could be drafted. Like last year, Hendon Hooker went in the 3rd round. Hendon Hooker in this class would probably be quarterback 6 or 7. He would be right in that Michael Penix Jr. conversation. But moving on to the running back class, even though I don't have many high, grades, I don't have any first-round running backs, I do like this running back class. I think there are a lot of good guys that are going to come out of here. Guys like Blake Corum, I think is going to be an elite goal line back at the NFL level. He's already, crazy on the goal line, or his success rate on the goal line is really good in the NCAA. But he's not the fastest. He's not the most elusive back. He's not the biggest back. He's only 5'7". But Blake Corum is good enough in pretty much every category where he's going to be probably the first or second running back off of the board. The combine numbers will, I think, boost his conversation. Because Blake Corum has good acceleration and he's got good speed at running back, but it's not going to be, the 4.3s. Like Bucky Irving is probably going to hit a 4.3. Like Travion Henderson will probably hit a 4.3. Blake Corum will hit like that 4.4 range, but also he's like a 90% success rate on the goal line, which is pretty coveted in the NFL. Look at like how long Ezekiel Elliott's been in the NFL, even though he hasn't been, the fastest. But moving on to Bucky Irving as well. Bucky Irving, I have at number 2. For PFF, he's like number 6 on the board. For a lot of guys, they have Audric Esteem and Trey Benson and Marshawn Lloyd above him. I really like Bucky Irving. He is very efficient. He had like a 6 point something yards per carry number on the season. He is crazy fast. I think he's one of, if not the fastest running back in this class. The explosiveness is definitely there with him. And also, he's got receiving upside. He was top 10 in receiving yards for running backs. So I think he is much more valued. He will be more valued as the draft goes along, just because he has, a crazy burst and he's got receiving upside, which is very coveted for, NFL front offices. Travion Henderson is the same thing, receiving upside, and he's crazy good on the ground. He's really fast, and he's got a bigger build. He's bigger, so he's going to be able to maybe carry that 3-down load as well. Braylon Allen is going to be that conversation where he's a super young running back. He is also another stronger running back out of Wisconsin, and he's going to draw a lot of Jonathan Taylor comparisons because Braylon Allen, 19 years old. Jonathan Allen, I think why am I blanking on his name? Jonathan Taylor was also 19 coming out of the draft as well. Also another bigger running back. Jonathan Taylor was like 6'2". No, he's like 5'11", but he was 220-ish pounds. Braylon Allen's like 230. Not extreme amount of speed, but he's a very, he's a sturdy running back, and he's also a good blocker as well. But Audric Esteem, huge senior year out of him from Notre Dame. He was pretty much the whole offense on the ground, and I'll talk about some of those Notre Dame offensive linemen later. But great season from him, really good on the ground. Another bigger, or not bigger running back, but 210. He's a starting running back, but he can cut through the holes very well, which is positive for running backs. Same thing I can say about Trey Benson, where he is, he'll get out of a bad situation. The line will not work that well because FSU's offensive line, had big ups and downs in the season. But then he'll break off a humongous run. Look at their game before Louisville, where he scored 3 touchdowns and had 200 yards, also receiving upside out of FSU. All right, moving on to guys like Marshawn Lloyd, Ray Davis, Taj Brooks, Corey Schrader, and I guess I'll end there because Raheem Sanders is transferring to, I don't know exactly where he's transferring, but all those guys I have as third-round guys. I like each of them, but not enough to, I think they all are going to go in the third round. Marshawn Lloyd out of USC, Ray Davis, Taj Brooks. Corey Schrader was a first-team All-American, actually, out of Missouri, but, advanced stage. But I'm 1,500 yards in the season. Taj Brooks, I think, also had 1,500. Ray Davis had 1,000. Marshawn Lloyd over 1,000. Like, all these guys are productive running backs, and you probably know their names, but, I'll have to look more in the film for the running backs to, exactly determine which ones I like more than the other. I kind of whipped the running backs outside of the top 5, which I pretty have like set in stone, those top 5 guys. I'll have to do some reordering on them once I get to it. But then Jace McMillan, Donovan Edwards, Will Shipley, Carson Steele, Frank Gore Jr., and then Amayan Williams. Amayan Williams, just declared a few days ago, actually. All right, moving on to the wide receiver class. I think that the wide receiver class is the best in the draft pretty easily. I have 3 top 10 prospects, that being Marvin Harrison Jr., my number 1 prospect. Romo Dunes is also a top 10, and then Malik Neighbors, I think, is my 10th or 9th in the draft. And then Keon Coleman to go in there. I like him a lot. Marvin Harrison Jr., Heisman finalist. 30 No, he doesn't have 30 touchdowns. No, I think he does maybe in the last 2 years at Ohio State. back-to-back 1,000-yard receiving years. And even with this year, last year he had C.J. Stroud. C.J. Stroud's balling in the NFL. He had Kyle McCord, who was transferring, going to another school. So, and then Kyle McCord he was good, but he was not like that great. He was not like a top 15, Ohio State caliber quarterback they've seen over the last 2 years with Justin Fields and C.J. Stroud. Two incredible receivers, two great college quarterbacks. But Marvin Harrison Jr., 6'4", 205, crazy body control, really fast as well. Great deep threat. He's that guy. Everybody knows Marvin Harrison Jr. He's my number one prospect in the draft. But then Romo Dunes, first team All-American out of Washington, again, number 2 seed. Romo Dunes also has that crazy body control. Like he's the back shoulder type of receiver where you can just throw it up to, wherever. You can throw it out, you can throw it behind him, and he'll come down with it, especially within the end zone. Also got the NFL 2-tap, which I really like to see with prospects. In the NCAA, you only need 1 foot down. In the NFL, you need 2. Romo Dunes is a guy who will get just 2 feet down. But also, he's a number 1 receiver. He's 6'3", 200-something pounds, and he's really fast as well. Out of Washington, they love to go deep, and Romo Dunes is primarily that guy. 1,400 yards, 13 touchdowns, something crazy like that. Extremely productive season in Washington. Last year, he was also productive at over 1,000 yards, I think 10 touchdowns as well. But then Malik Neighbors led the NCAA in receiving yards, was the first team All-American. Marvin Harrison Jr. won the Biletnikoff, or the best receiver in the nation. Malik Neighbors was 1 vote behind him. He was 1 vote behind him. But Neighbors is my number 1 slot. But he's more of a slot hybrid. He can go outside. He can really work in the slot. But another really fast and elusive receiver who obviously was a great deep threat. Led the NCAA in, I think it was yards per catch, and he led in yards per route run, and he led in, obviously, receiving yards. But, Jaden Daniels was just tossing it down. He's tossing bombs, and Malik Neighbors was coming down with it. Also, a lot better size than I thought. I thought Malik Neighbors was like a 5'10", smaller type receiver. Neighbors is 6 foot, 200 pounds. So, he's got that size to boost along with that speed and with the catch point ability. Like him a lot. Keon Coleman is the kind of outlier between all the top 10 receivers that I have on my list. He has the least amount of yards from any of these guys, with around, 700. He only has 700 yards in the season, but he has 11 touchdowns, 12 touchdowns. And what I really like about Keon Coleman is his catch point ability. I know he led the NCAA in contested targets, but he only converted around 10 of them. But the thing about Keon Coleman is, in the end zone, I think he had a 100% success rate, which I like a lot. But I think I'm going to end up moving Keon Coleman down to probably a 2nd round grade, just because, with that production, the yards production has never really been there, and I don't think his route running ability is fully developed. Also mentioned transfer out of Michigan State. With that whole Michigan State ordeal in the beginning of the season. But I like Keon Coleman, but the route tree is probably going to be his negative. I fear he'll draw comparisons to guys like Quentin Johnson, like big receivers who are really good in the end zone, but not the most productive and not the best route running. So it's kind of hard for them to get, moving in the NFL or being a productive 1st round guy, which I think Keon Coleman has a good chance to go in the 1st round. But then Troy Franklin out of Oregon, Bo Nix is number 1 guy. Also another really fast guy. The thing about him is he's sick. He's tall, but he's skinny. So he's not the strongest receiver, but he's fast and he's really good on crossing routes. Oregon would run those play actions, and Troy Franklin would just be wide open at 30 yards downfield. So like him a lot. Also productive season at Oregon, 1,300 yards, 14 touchdowns, something light. Brian Thomas Jr., the number 2 to Malik Neighbors. 6-year number, and we have a lot of X receivers, by the way, in this class. Like Marvin Harrison is an X, Romo Dunes is an X, Keon Coleman is an X, Troy Franklin's like a Y, like Malik Neighbors is a Z or a Y, Brian Thomas Jr. is an X, like Adonai Mitchell is an X, Xavier Legette is an X, Johnny Wilson is an X. We have a lot of X is a number one receiver, like a boundary guy. Brian Thomas Jr. is another boundary guy. He's like 6'4", 200 something pounds. He's got really good, jet like straight line speed, really good straight line speed. But with that 6'4" build, he's got to block a little bit better. Maybe not the greatest effort as a blocker. However, catch point ability is there, body control is there especially for a 6'4" bigger receiver. I like him out a lot at LSU. Jalen Polk out of Washington and Xavier Worthy, or I'll talk about the Texas guys in a second. But Jalen Polk out of Washington, again, a number 2 guy to Romo Dunes. Really, really, really good duos in college football we saw this season. I'll move on to another duo in Xavier Worthy and Adonai Mitchell. But Jalen Polk, I don't know his exact height or weight, but it's like 6'1", something like that. But he is another like a lot of these receivers have the same strengths, which is body control, deep threat speed, and catch point ability. Jalen Polk shares pretty similar traits with Romo Dunes, and that's what really makes them a lethal duo in college football. And then I'll talk about Jalen McMillan a little bit later, but he got injured during the season. But Xavier Worthy, Adonai Mitchell. Adonai Mitchell is the bigger receiver. He's more of that, route running. He's got a better route tree than Xavier Worthy, I would say. Also with that, size, he's good at the catch point. But Xavier Worthy has great special teams upside. He was a first team All-American as a punt returner. And Xavier Worthy is super fast. He'll probably run within the 4.3s, maybe even low 4.4s. But I had a big issue with his tracking and catching last year, and that really got better over the year as I think he eclipsed over 1,000 yards this year. And the drop percentage went down, and the tracking ability looked a lot better. Same thing with Quinn Ewers' accuracy, improving as well, as now they're in the college football playoffs. But he did get injured. He did get injured in the game against Kansas State, or Oklahoma State. But I'm pretty sure he'll be back for the college football playoffs. So, like those 2 guys out of Texas, I have them as late second round guys. And then Xavier Legette out of South Carolina, very slept on receiver. I'll skip Emeka Egbuka for a second. But Xavier Legette, 1,000 yards, something like that, playing with Spencer Rattler, number 1 receiver there, 6'3", roughly 200 something pounds. Another guy, contested catch artist. But Emeka Egbuka, thing about him is he had a really good sophomore year with C.J. Stroud, NFL guy. And now he moved on to Kyle McCord, who targeted Julian Fleming more than he did Emeka Egbuka. But I look at last year, I see a guy who, has great hands, especially at the catch point. He's got a good route tree. I think he'll go later than some people expected from last year. Like, I think a lot of JSN conversations will come up as well, where it's super productive sophomore year, but kind of fell off the map a little bit in his, the year that he came into the draft. So he'll probably drop due to that. But I still like Emeka Egbuka. I think he'll be productive, but he's likely a 2 at the NFL level. Johnny Wilson, for a guy that's like 6'6", 6'5", big receiver, he's got a drop issue. That's primarily why I have him in the 3rd round. Drop issue, not the greatest route running outside of like slants and dig routes. Not the strongest hands at the catch point, and a bit of a drop issue at FSU. That's kind of why I have him in the 3rd round, but I like Johnny Wilson. Malik Corley, Brendan Rice, the son of Jerry Rice. It's kind of crazy that, Jerry Rice's son will now be in the NFL. Most productive receiver out of USC, Roman Wilson out of Michigan. Very solid there, but, Michigan's receivers this year, kind of sidelined by their running game and by, J.J. McCarthy a little bit too, running a few of those in. But Roman Wilson was the most productive guy out of Michigan, had like half of their touchdowns through the air as well. Great red zone guy, but not the most productive. Same thing with Keon Coleman, except, Roman Wilson is like 5'11", so not the biggest receiver as well. Trey Harris at Ole Miss. Tez Walker, I talked about a little at USC. He had a bit of a transfer issue thing with the NCAA, weird guidelines where he couldn't play for the first couple of games. But when he came back, he had like 100 yards a game with Drake May. I think if you're an NFL team, you're going to be looking to combine Tez Walker and Drake May in the NFL. That's going to be 1,000 yards right there with Tez Walker. But obviously, with the missed games, I don't think he'll get as much hype or notability other than the guys like the Big Ten guys. I would say the Big Ten guys. I probably will move him up more than a fourth round grade because I do like Tez Walker. But Taj Washington, Ladd McConkey, Jacob Cowing, Ricky Perelson, who just declared, Jermaine Burton, Malik Washington, Jalen McMillan, Torrey Horton, Dorian Singer, Mario Williams. A lot of those USC guys are going to jump in the draft or jump in the portal. I think maybe one has already. Like, Brandon Rice had to go to the draft. Taj Washington has to go to the draft. Like, those guys are seniors. But, like, Dorian Singer, transfer from Arizona, came in. I think he maybe has one more transfer. Like, Mario Williams, I think, also has to go in the draft. But then Julian Fleming out of Ohio State. That rounds out my receivers. And this will probably be the time where I start going a little quicker. I'm like 30 minutes in to the recording. I'll cut this a little bit. But tight ends, I like him outside of... I love Brock Bowers. Obviously, he's the Travis Kelce build of tight end, like a big receiver at tight end. He plays in the slot like 40% of the time, which is extremely similar to how Travis Kelce does it. First team All-American. He's the only tight end to win the tight end award. I forgot what the name of it was, but he won it twice. He won it last year. He won it this year. The best tight end in the nation. Crazy on that Georgia offense. Pretty much was before his injury. He was even one of the most productive receivers in the NCAA. Even if you didn't want to count him as a tight end, he was top. I don't know if he was top 10 in receiving yards, but I mean, for a tight end, he was 100 yards above the next guy. But then Jatavion Sanders, a lot of those Texas guys haven't declared yet because they're in the college football playoffs. But Jatavion Sanders, if he does declare, he'll be one of those. I think he'll be the best in-line tight end because he has great run blocking ability, and he also has good speed at the tight end position, great at the catch point, bigger guy, great in the middle of the field. Have him as my second tight end. But then Dallin Holker, a lot of people do not know Dallin Holker, second team All-American. I'm pretty sure he's a second team All-American. But he was the most productive tight end in college football. He had the most tight end yards. I think he had the most tight end touchdowns as well. If Brock Bowers wasn't hurt, it would have been him. But Dallin Holker, 6'5" guy, strong guy, but he plays in the slot, and he plays at the wide receiver position a ton, so he kind of breaks that barrier. But solid blocker-ish, not the best. He'll likely work as a receiving tight end. But I think once the Senior Bowl comes around, he'll be that standout because Dallin Holker is probably the second best or the third best receiving tight end in the draft. But then you got guys like Cade Stover, Ben Sinnott, Jaheim Bell, Eric all those guys I have to go in the third round. Like Ben Sinnott, great blocking tight end, great H-back type of guy. Jaheim Bell is like the typical H-back, smaller tight end, but he's super fast. And he kind of works like he's kind of built like a running back, kind of built like a receiver, but fits that H-back role. Jared Wiley, Theo Johnson, AJ Barner, Trey Knox, Michael Trigg, Brevin Spanford. But I think I'm going to end up removing Brevin Spanford because he's like the worst qualified tight end or the worst qualified receiver because he has like a humongous drop. He's like a 20% drop rate. I don't think he'll go in the NFL unless other than like a blocking tight end because he's got the size for a blocking tight end, but he's not even the best blocker relative according to PFF. But then for the tackles and I guess we'll go with the offensive line. I don't have a ton, obviously, because I don't know all the guys who have declared, and the offensive linemen, they'll kind of start popping out as more people on Twitter start finding these great tackles and guards. But obviously, we can start with the big ones, like Joe Alt, first-team All-American. He was a first-team last year as well, two-time first-team All-American. He was the number one highest-graded offensive tackle for PFF, and, I mean, his technique is phenomenal. He only has one sack allowed on the season. I think he's top 5 least amount of pressures allowed for offensive tackles. Really like him a lot. I think he's a top 5 prospect as still. I had him as top 5 in the preseason. Olufasanu out of Penn State, 0 sacks allowed or 1 sack allowed according to PFF. Again, the same thing with the unlimited amount of pressures. And again, first team All-American, great as a run blocker. However, Olafasano, even as such a big offensive tackle, I think he can be overpowered a little bit. You could see that a good example is JT Tuimoloau out of Ohio State kind of destroyed him when he went up one-on-one against him in that Penn State-Ohio State game. That's a little bit of a red flag for a really big offensive tackle as a pass blocker, but great run blocker. Speaking about run blocking, Talaisi Fuaga out of Oregon State is the best run blocker in the draft. Another guy, 6'6", 330. Big, strong. This dude's buff. Dude, big, strong offensive tackle out of Oregon State. Obviously, I think he'll also go in the first round. Guys love run blockers, especially now that, running output is, it's slowly decreasing over time. We only have like two, I think, 1,000-yard rushers in the NFL currently. One is Christian McCaffrey, and the other one I don't know exactly. But then I have my two right tackles, J.C. Latham and Artemis Mims. You can interject them, but J.C. Latham doesn't have, I don't think, that elite ability to negate defenders, but also I think he allowed 1 sack this year as well. He allowed less than, I think, 12 pressures it was, but Artemis Mims injury kind of took out half of his season, the latter half especially. I think he got injured in week 6. But again, another strong offensive tackle. Patrick Paul out of Houston. The thing about Patrick Paul is he allowed the least amount of pressures and he allowed 0 sacks. But also he plays in Houston. His competition is not SEC competition in the trenches. But very solid technically offensive line. Also got the size. Graham Barton and Jordan Morgan out of Duke and Arizona. 2 left tackles. 2 guys I think go in the second round. Troy Fautanu. And then Tyler Guyton out of Oklahoma, Kingsley Sumatai, who just declared, Blake Fisher out of Notre Dame, and then Joachim Moyam. And then I removed Zion Nelson. I removed him a while ago. He didn't play. I don't know if he has 1 more year eligibility, but this is going to be his second medical redshirt. Or I know he redshirted once, but he might have the medical redshirt. I think it was an Achilles or ACL, something like that. But moving on to guard, I have kind of 4 guys that I really like. I accidentally had Troy Fatuanu twice. That's news to me. I don't know if I had him at guard or if I had him at tackle. I'll have to look again, but whatever. Zach Zinter, I'll just ignore him for now because I talked about him a little bit. Zach Zinter out of Michigan, injury in I think it was against Ohio State. Injury against Ohio State, but he was the highest graded guard in the NCAA next to Cooper Beebe, who, I got a Kansas State guard tackle. I'll finish talking about Zach Zinter. I don't know why I strayed away from him. But right guard, the very solid run blocker. That's where he'll probably make his money in the NFL. But now I'll move on to Cooper Beebe. The thing about him is positional versatility. He played at right tackle his sophomore year. He played left tackle for a minute. He played both guard positions, left guard and right guard. And the thing about Cooper Beebe is he's got great size and great run blocking ability, as well as being a good pass blocker. Christian Hayes at UConn. Shout out to UConn. I live in Connecticut. But also another solid guard. Troy Fatuanu. I don't know if I had my guard or tackle. I'll have to look again. I think it's guard though. But I'll have to look at a snap position. Christian Mahogany, Connor Colby, Donovan Jackson, Bukes Leonard, Layden Robinson, Tate Ratledge, and Javon Cohen. I have all the guard. And then center, I've got Jackson Powers Johnson, first-team All-American. Oh, yeah, Zach Zinter, Cooper Beebe, by the way, 2 first-team All-Americans, according to the AP. And then the AP put Jackson Powers Johnson as a first-team All-American, best pass-blocking center in the draft. 0 sacks allowed. He had 5 pressures. Yeah, Jackson Powers Johnson's phenomenal pass blocker. And also a very solid run blocker as well. But he'll be the first center likely taken in the draft. And then you have Cedric Prawn. I had to do the same thing with Christian Hayes too. I have him at 2 positions. I really think he's a center. But also a guy that plays 2 positions. Cedric Van Prawn out of Georgia, 1 sack allowed, 12 something pressures, 10 pressures at Georgia. Another very solid pass blocker. Zach Frazier, Bryce Foster, and then Drake Nugent. Drake Nugent I'll probably end up boosting. I don't think he'll be a 5th rounder. I think he'll go before then. But then moving on to my edge rusher, which I think is the second best position in the draft outside of quarterback, which I have them battling between 2 and 3. Leatu Latu, best edge rusher in the class. He's 6'5", roughly 260. I think he's maybe 250, something like that. But like great pass rusher. He was third in NCAA pressures. He had 13 sacks, first team All American. And the big thing about Leatu too was the big concerns coming into the year was run defending and injuries. He had a big neck injury or big back, something like that, in 2021 that cut off his season there. But then last year he came back in a limited pass rushing role with I think he was like 10 sacks or something like that in a situational rushing role. But then this year he became a full-time edge rusher. He gained some weight, and he became a much better run defender. And then as a pass rusher, he's the same. He's got great power. He's got great burst off the edge, good bend, good speed, and the production showed the last 2 years. He's had 10 plus sacks, first team All American. He's my number one edge rusher in this class. And then Dallas Turner, my second edge rusher in this class. Another same thing coming into the year was run defending was I think his biggest issue, and got a lot better as a run defender this year. Got a lot better as an edge setter. But phenomenal pass rusher. He's got great bend on the outside. Great, his speed is what's gonna make him money in the NFL. And then Braylon Trice, number one, first in the NCAA in pressures with like 70, even though it kind of didn't look like it. But the thing about Braylon Trice is he's a bigger edge rusher. He's got size to him. He really sets the edge. He's a good run defender, but he can push an offensive lineman back a lot. And then Jared Verse at FSU, he did not have a great start to the season, but as time went on, the production that already made sense last year because the production was great last year. It got better. He had I think finished with like 9 sacks, and he was top. I don't think he was top 10 in pressure just because he had a lot slower of a start because he came back from injury, but. Jared Verse, very technical, very solid technical edge rusher, very good strength at the point, good at getting his hands into the chest of the offensive lineman. There are 4 really good edge rushers in this class, and I think all will go early in the first round. I think Leatu Latu and Dallas Turner and Braylon Trice are top 15 guys, and then Jared Verse I think is a mid first round kind of edge rusher. All right, a little hiccup. My camera died. But I guess moving on to the other edge rushers in this class, you've got Jonah Ellis, Chop Robinson, Chris Braswell, Princely Uman Malayan, who Uman Malayan is actually in the transfer portal right now. It's got another year eligibility, and then JT Tuamoloau. Talked a little bit earlier. Jonah Ellis, top 10 in pressures. He had 10 sacks. Great out of Utah. Strong edge rusher. But then you have Chop Robinson, who it was more of a situational pass rusher out of Penn State. More of a 2 down, 2 out of 3, 66%, whatever you want to call it. Edge rusher out of Penn State. Didn't play... I think he played early downs and he played late downs. Early downs, more likely to pass. Late downs, more likely to pass. Early downs, more likely to run. But Chop Robinson, the thing to me that stood out with Chop Robinson was his snap count. I only played around 300 snaps for Penn State, which is kind of rare because, teams play like 60 snaps a game, and he would average roughly 30 to 40 snaps per game, which means that he's not in every down, which means he's more of a 2-down guy. But he is really good pass rusher. The bend and the speed off the edge is what's going to make him... I think he'll get drafted pretty early, whether that's in the second round, even though the production, in 2022, it was like 4 sacks. But people could already see that the talent was there. And then this year, I think it was like 8. So it's not as high as guys like Dallas Turner, Leatu Latu, Braylon Trice. It's not that kind of production. But the tape will show a guy that has, really good pass rushing ability in a situational role that, teams will use. And that's what I think is going to stands out about Chop Robinson, and that's why people like PFF have him as their second rated edge rusher, even though I don't think he is. I have him at 6 right now, but that'll show up. And then Chris Braswell, also another big reason why Alabama's defense was really good. He had even more pressures, more sacks, and more defensive run stops than Dallas Turner. But Dallas Turner obviously is the standout edge rusher. He's got better pure raw skills, but Chris Braswell is a very productive player as well. But you have Prince UMN Malayan, who is in the transfer portal right now. He'll probably go in next year's class. Also another guy with great strength and great motor as an edge rusher. But then JT Tomoluau is the motor guy. He's hold my camera up a little bit. He's an up and down player. I'll go out and say it. He'll have a game where he'll have one pressure, or he'll have a game where he'll have game wrecking plays. Like look at him against Penn State, where he'll destroy Olufasanu for like 2 sacks, and have, I think he had 3 sacks in that game. Really good game against Penn State. But then he'll go up against like Indiana and he'll have like 1 pressure. Like where did that elite production go? Up and down player, but he's a big edge rusher. He's 6'4", 260. 260. It's listed at 270 on his ESPN little thing, but he's really big. I would wonder if a team would want to move him into the 3-tech or a 4-eye. I think that's where he fits better. Not as like a pure edge rusher, like a 5 to 7 tech type of edge rusher. I think he actually fits better inside, just because he's got much good power. He does not have pretty much any bend. He doesn't have the best speed off of the line, but like he's strong. He can push a bigger offensive lineman back. So I think he probably works better as an inside rusher, as an inside defensive player. And it's not like he's going to get bullied. He's like 270. Like if he gains a little bit of size, he could probably easily be a defensive tackle. But then Jalen Green at a JMU, a lot of people didn't know him. James Madison, obviously their first year in the FBS. And he had 15 and a half sacks. He was a first team All-American, which a lot of people didn't know. But I'll have to look more of because I only watched one JMU game. And I think that was the game that he missed because he got hurt. He's been injured the last couple of games. But 15 and a half sack season, I don't know if he was top 5 in pressures. I think he was. But then Jack Sawyer at Ohio State, Solomon Byrd, Gabriel and Grayson Murphy, twins at a UCLA, Zion Tupatul-Fetui. His name is still hard to pronounce. I've still been messing it up since the preseason. Akeem Massador and then Cedric Johnson. I don't know about their status with the draft. I don't know if they've declared or not. I'll have to fix this board with the guys who are actually going into the draft and who aren't. Then I have the 2 best interior defensive linemen. I've really come on to this defensive lineman class just because of pretty much 3 guys, which is Tavondre Sweat, interior lineman out of Texas, and then Jerzon Newton, and then Byron Murphy. I'll talk about him in a second. But then Jerzon Johnny Newton, Illinois, and then Tavondre Sweat were both first-team All-Americans, and both had crazy seasons. Tavondre Sweat is a Jordan Davis type of defensive lineman. If you guys know Jordan Davis, first rounder from the Eagles, he really made that Georgia national championship defense with his run defending ability. But Tavondre Sweat also has crazy pass rushing upside. He had like 4 sacks, he was like top 5 in defensive tackle pressures, but more importantly, he was the highest graded run defender. But he is just like how are you going to defend his strength and his weight? He's like 360 pounds, and he moves very well for a nose tackle, 3-tech monster like that. It's very hard to stop. But then you have like Jerzon Newton, who's a little bit lighter at the position. He's around like 300 pounds flat, maybe like 290, but he's a phenomenal pass rusher. He was top 3 in defensive tackle pressures. He had like 8 sacks, first team All-American, obviously, but also similarly a very good run defender. But he's probably the better of the pass rushers between him and Tavondre Sweat. But then you add in Byron Murphy, who was 6 sacks in the season, led interior defensive lineman in pressures, probably the best pass rushing interior defensive lineman. And still another very solid run defender. But the thing about Byron Murphy is, he doesn't have to go in this class. He's, I think, a junior. He can definitely have another year eligibility, especially because Texas is going to definitely lose Tavondre Sweat because, Sweat is a first-round guy, in my opinion. Byron Murphy can come back to Texas. But I think if I were to list all these guys, I probably have them as first rounders. Byron Murphy, I might even move into the first round. But then you got guys like Chris Jenkins, Leonard Taylor Jr., Dante Corleone, Howard Cross, Ruka Horo, Michael Hall Jr. All these guys I think are second, third round guys. Chris Jenkins Jr., son of Chris Jenkins, former NFL player on the Jets actually. And then Leonard Taylor out of Miami. Dante Corleone, another guy. I don't think he has to go in this class. He is only a redshirt sophomore. He has another year or two of eligibility. Howard Cross Jr. out of Notre Dame, another solid guy. Ruka Horo, I think, is the best Clemson guy outside of him and Tyler Davis. And then you got like Talik Williams, Tyler Davis, Mekhi Wingo, Mason Smith, Brandon Dolores. Mason Smith, I think, got to come back. He came back this year from injury from an ACL that stumped his 2021 or 2022 season. But again, highly touted prospect coming out of high school. And then came to LSU and just really wasn't the same this year. I think he should come back and have a second try at that. Probably boost his draft stock because as it sits, I don't know how high he'll go. But then you look at the interior defensive lineman class. A lot of these guys just declared. Peyton Wilson, out of NC State, first team All-American, won the Best Defensive Player of the Year award for the NCAA. I don't know what that was, but he was also, I think, rated as the highest linebacker by the NCAA. Oh no, I know he was a first team All-American, won the Best Defensive Player of the Year award, won the Best Linebacker. And highest graded PFF linebacker as well. Edgerrin Cooper out of Texas A&M as well, just declared. Jeremiah Trotter, Barrett Carter, Danny Stutzman, Tommy Eichenberg, Jaden Dumas-Johnson. Jaden Dumas-Johnson actually just jumped in the transfer portal. But back to Peyton Wilson. This dude is a freak in coverage. He's also got crazy. He's got great NFL size, 6'4", 230. He allowed a 47% passer rating, which for a linebacker is really good. Great run defender as well. And he had 3 interceptions, 0 touchdowns, a few forced fumbles as well. Pretty much all around the most balanced true Mike linebacker in this class. In a class that has a lot of Mikes and a lot of Wills. But Peyton Wilson, first round grade, love him. Really like him at NC State. I think teams will probably recognize that and make him the first linebacker off of the board. Edgerrin Cooper is more of a weak side or a strong side hybrid linebacker edge rusher type. He had 8 sacks. He had 8 sacks last season. First team All-American. I think top 10 in tackles as well. Really good linebacker at Texas A&M. I don't know whether to make him a jack or whether to make him a inside linebacker. But he probably leans more into that inside linebacker because he does drop into coverage a lot more. He's just very efficient on his edge rush or on his rushing snaps. That's why he had 8 sacks on the season. But he drops into coverage more and he defends a lot more. He plays more of that box type of linebacker role. So I have him as my interior guy. Jeremiah Trotter and Barrett Carter, the linebacker duo out of Clemson. Didn't have as great as a year as maybe Jeremiah and Barrett Carter had last year, but I still prefer Jeremiah Trotter a little bit. I think he's better in coverage, and Barrett Carter Jr. better in run defending. But both are, got the similar build, except Barrett Carter is a little more stout at 6'1", 6'2", 230. Meanwhile, Jeremiah Trotter is 6'3", 220. And then you have Danny Stutzman, Tommy Eichenberg out of Oklahoma and Ohio State. 2 different reports came out about Danny Stutzman, whether he was going to the draft or wasn't, and I think PFF kind of declared it, where they said he was going in the draft. Now the strong run defender, strong tackler with Danny Stutzman. Tommy Eichenberg is just a accruer as well. Junior Colson, Cedric Gray, Jackson Mitchell, Omar Spates, and then Salmon Mitchell Jr. or Smale. His name's also hard to pronounce. But moving on to cornerback. You have essentially Nate Wiggins, who I think is a ways away above. Him and Kool-Aid McKinstry, I think, are ways way above the rest of the guys. I guess we can include Cooper DeJean in that as well. Kool-Aid, I don't know who was the other first-team All-American I think it was Quinn and Mitchell. It was Cooper DeJean, like Quinn and Mitchell, and then Kool-Aid McKinstry. Nate Wiggins, though, I think is the best prospect relative out of the rest of those guys. He's got that boundary cornerback build at like 6'2", roughly 200-ish pounds. Really good press cornerback, strong. He had like 2 interceptions, 1 touchdown allowed, 40-ish passer rating allowed. Great guy, or great cornerback. And then you have Kool-Aid McKinstry, who was more of, he's still a boundary, but he's like 6 foot, 180 something, thinner cornerback. But I mean, he's fast. He'll track with the best of the speed receivers. I mean, we see a little bit with like Alabama against Texas. I don't think he allowed a touchdown in that game. I don't know. I think it was Xavier Worthy he was guarding, and he was guarding him pretty well. But then you have Cooper DeJean, like obviously white cornerback. Like there's a stigma in the NFL, or stigma against white cornerbacks. So because we haven't seen a white boundary cornerback in 20 years. I mean, it's been a long time. But Cooper DeJean, I mean, first team All-American, super fast. I mean, athleticism through the roof. Punt returner, elite punt returner as well. But I'm afraid he'll get I'm always worried that he'll get the safety. Like, oh yeah, we can just move him to safety because he'll be better in that role. I think he'll be better. I think he'll still fit in the boundary. I mean, I don't have him as a first round grade, but I think as a second round, second option as a boundary guy, I think he'll work. I think he works for a team. I mean, there's a chance he can go in the first round even too, because he was first team All-American. Great production the last 2 years out of Iowa. And I mean, Iowa's, touted defense. And DeJean is a good reason why. Then you have Denzel Burke out of Ohio State and Kalen King out of Penn State. I like these guys, but I don't like them enough to maybe be super high on them. But, I think this is a weaker cornerback class than it was the last 2 years. But Denzel Burke, solid build as well. Solid build, six something. Good press, cornerback, good strength as well. Kalen King as well, more of a shutdown kind of guy out of Penn State, even though he's not the fastest or not the best tracker. A lot of those other cornerbacks out of Penn State got those interceptions other than him. But then you have Quinyon Mitchell. Quinyon Mitchell is out of Toledo. But, I mean, he was the highest, I think he's the highest graded PFF cornerback. He had 40 passer rating allowed, few interceptions that boosted his conversation a lot. And then PFF had him as a first-team All-American. He wasn't a first-team All-American according to the AP poll. At least I'm fairly certain. I don't know if he might have been. Don't quote me on it. He might have been an All-Pro. But you have Terrion Arnold, who I think is the best slot cornerback in the draft. And you have Josh Newton, Chris Abrams-Durain, Kamari Lassiter, Kamal Hayden, Kalen Carson, Alex Johnson. Those guys have going in the third round. Max Melton, Fentrell Cypress, Dwight McLaughlin, Miles Jones, TJ Tampa, Jason Marshall, and then Jalen Simpson. And then moving on to safety, I guess for my last position in this process, my board is essentially Kamari Kinshins and then Kalen Bullock. Kamari Kinshins, 5 interceptions this year, 5 interceptions last year, or 6? No, it was 6. Kamari Kinshins, 11 interceptions in the last 2 years. Even playing in a box role, he just got, he's a tracker. He'll just get, he'll just get interceptions essentially. Great at tracking the ball. Great at catching the ball too. He does not drop interceptions. That's not a stat, but essentially he's not going to miss his opportunities to get interceptions. Like him a lot out of Miami. Even though he's not the biggest safety, he's around like 5'11", 200 and something pounds. It plays in a box. He plays in a strong safety. No, he plays in a free safety role. It's James Williams that plays more of a box role. But if you want an over-the-top center fielder safety, Kamari Kinshins, and I think is your guy. And the same thing can be said about Kalen Bullock, who I like a lot. I don't know how many interceptions he got this year. I think it's like 2 or 3. But pass deflections took a humongous increase. Instead of, jumping for those balls, Kalen Bullock was making humongous plays on that horrible USC defense. And he's, if you're watching USC games, he was really making a lot of crucial plays for their defense. Last year he had 5 interceptions. This year he had 2 or 3, but he had like 8 pass deflections. So like him a lot at like him a lot. Tyler Nubin, Minnesota, first team All-American. Very solid year from him as well. Then you had Javon Biller, Jalen Simpson, Cole Bishop, Rod Moore, James Williams, Malachi Moore, Andrew Mobuka. Mobuka, by the way, is, he's a slot. He's a slot safety type of guy. He'll play either within the box or he'll play in the slot. He's going in the transfer portal, so I don't think he'll be in this class. And then you have J.D. Barron, you have Jalen Catalan, Damar Richards, and then Sione Vaki. Sione Vaki, he's a fun prospect because he had he's a safety. He is a starting safety for Utah, but he had 5 touchdowns, 6 touchdowns on offense, and he played a running back role. He played I don't know. His role was weird because I did a game for Pro Football Focus where I did Utah versus Arizona. Obviously, the game didn't go as well for Utah, but on their offense, he got 7 carries. And then you have games against, I don't know who exactly it was, but he had 2 touchdowns and 100 yards and 6 receiving receptions against some team. So Sione Vaki, I think he'll more be of a hybrid defensive, offensive skill guy. He doesn't really fit. I know he is a true strong safety. He's a true strong safety or free. No, he's a true strong safety. But he definitely could get some offensive opportunities. But that's going to do it for this video. I mean, I have a ton of prospects, and obviously I cannot mention. I mean, I'm already at an hour in recording time, so obviously I can't mention all these prospects. It's going to be more difficult to do that in these type of videos, but if you like it, I will end up doing full-fledged videos on all these positions pretty much, in a much more broader video where I, rank my top 10, or if you guys want, I'll rank pretty much all of these, pretty much, and I'll give grades. By that time, I'll be giving grades to these players. But obviously, these are only projections as of right now. Once I get started doing the film, or looking at in-depth statistics on them, and do more of a individual breakdown on pretty much most of these guys, I'll get to around 100. I don't think I'll get to all these prospects. I'll have around 250 names on the board, but I'll probably break down around 100. I would say 100 is a pretty good number. And then I'll do full prospect breakdowns, definitely prospect breakdowns on around, I hope, 30. I really hope I do a prospect breakdown on, I think I'll do one on each of my top 10 guys. I'll definitely do one on every top 10 guy that I have. And then I'll do some fun ones. I'll do I don't have a ton of these guys. I don't know if I'll do all my first rounders, or if I'll just do the guys that I really want to do a film breakdown on, or if I find a really fun prospect, I'll let you guys know. But I'll obviously try to make as many YouTube videos as possible. I know I've been slowing down a little bit, but that's just because I finished my semester at college, and that sucks. College is finals week is a little bit of a grind, so now I got to start on my second grind. But that's gonna do it for this video. Make sure you guys like, comment, and subscribe. Make sure you guys follow my Twitter as well. Let me know your thoughts about my big board. And, yeah, see you guys in the next one.